Hey everybody, Morello here. We're about to go over a new design review we did of a fan-made League of Legends champion from Definitely Not over on the Twitch stream. We go into some really interesting problems in this one, including when goals compete, how do you resolve those against each other? Thematics and mechanics relationship to each other, and resolving problems that need to be resolved either in the paper kit phase versus when you can actually test them. I had a lot of fun doing this and reconnecting with League of Legends design into some capacity. So I really hope you'll enjoy that context. This doesn't have anything to do with like meta or balance or any of that. So it's just a fan design. And it's also a little long. This is about 40 minutes. So stay with us. But I tried to split it up. It didn't make any sense. But I hope you enjoy this and I hope it's at least educational or interesting. Thanks. I see we're already in the meta debates. Now this is a League of Legends design. That's how this works. Okay, well thank you for presenting this and taking the time to make it and coming on stream to share it with me. So we're gonna start by
reviewing it.
Of course.
Your time is.
Let's look over this. I'm gonna read out loud a little bit. No editing live, not yet. I'm gonna go ahead and put myself on suggesting. You'll make any edits yourself later. Masala, thanks for the sub. Thanks. What does this button do? Thanks, Duder. I appreciate it. It's time to get another one of these. So it looks like you decided to start with a thematic to fulfill as your top line, or maybe not. I don't know if this is ordered, but let's take a look. Thematics.
Yeah, that's ordered.
A well-educated.
I know where to start, so I wanted to add okay, I want to make a mage that's hard to play and build a thematic first and then design over that.
Okay.
Wanted to build a small lore, basic lore, and then design over that.
Okay.
Make a skeleton, an empty skeleton.
Okay. We'll talk about both. We'll evaluate your. We'll go over that what you've done here, and we'll also talk. I think afterwards when to use theme first and when to use mechanics first, because there's a time and place for both too. And I think I'm glad because Masala did the opposite. Did the other one, so we'll have both kind of ideas here on that, and I think that'll be nice to see both. So we have a well-educated and powerful mage. Vladimir and Swain fit this, but they are both very short-range mages. Self-made, they earned their power on their own, not through some external source. An egomaniac, something similar to Draven, but in a mage role, like the champion to be niche rather than popular. Okay, great. So this is fine thematics to fulfill. This sounds like thematics you want to see in the game, right? I think here's some things. When starting with thematics, there's a couple of additional. So here's what we're gonna do. There's two places that thematics can help us start. One of them is wouldn't it be cool if? And wouldn't it be cool if is a great place to do brainstorming and idea generation, but we want to be kind of one level more specific of that when starting the design. And so here's what I'm going to suggest here. I'm going to put a few bullet points here. Why these thematics? What niche, hole, or opportunity do you see in the roster? And I think, hold on, let me get a couple of these out here. What players do you want to serve? And that's a two-part question. Currently served players, but a different version, or unserved players missing a champion specifically for them. And the reason we ask these questions is because any thematic can be fine, but what we want to do is anchor it in our reasoning of why we want these things. So I'm guessing when you came up with these, there's two ways you could have came up with these that I can imagine. Well, there's more, but I'm going to talk about two. That you could be like, I love these ideas. I think they're cool. The other way is, when I look at the roster, I don't think this is present or served or represented, and I want to see it represented. Here's why. I think the latter approach is more anchoring to let you evaluate your thematics kind of more structured without having to take away the creative elements of it. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah. I wanted to say that currently serve players, but in a different version. That's what I wanted to That's why I said something like assassins have Kiana and ADCs have Draven.
Okay.
If they have to, for example, ADC gets filled mid, he can play this champ, still feel like Draven.
Mm-hmm.
And with unserved players, the mages that are hard to play at this current state of the game are Asir and Aurelion Sol. And I feel like both of them are not standard mages.
Mm-hmm.
Like Asir is auto attack based, while Azol is hard roamer and has a very weird gameplay loop.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to make a more standard mage that could fulfill these thematics.
Okay, great. Then I would do this. We'll go into the design goals, and I'll talk about that. That's great. So I would, when we're done here, when you do your edits, because we should do the edits after. Usually the process is we do a review, and I give comments either in real time or in paper, in this case both. And then you go back and turn those comments, take those comments and ideas and fill in your answers. So I think when you go back over this, you want to make sure that that's well written down. I think you did talk a little bit about this here, but I think explaining why this is important. So this is a harder question, but just give it a shot. I think by just asking the question of like, why do we need this? In a game like League, it has a unique challenge because there's so many characters that the challenge isn't coming up with new stuff or coming up with stuff because a lot of things have been done. It's coming up with stuff that hasn't been mostly filled before, right? And so even in this, like, you're trying to do something here that I think you do see as a whole in the roster thematically, but I think it's like it bears a little explanation about a little bit more of what that is here. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go into oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think chat can't hear me quite well, and I don't think I can raise my volume.
Oh, okay, I got you. Try now.
Hi.
How's this, chat?
We have trolls, apparently.
Thank you, Steppen. All right, so yeah, I would definitely want to fill in the why is this important here too, because let's say I'll even assume that this matters and is important as opposed to it's not. By asking this question, though, we better define the design. We better define what later will matter, because like imagine you got feedback that you're like, this is too similar to Kiana, and you're like, okay, is that bad? This can help you go, is that bad or good? Should I adjust my design based on this feedback? And gives you some anchoring. Okay. Design goals. The ideal goal is to make a powerful mage and heavy damage numbers and bursts. This is very good right here. I want to call out is you used a self definition. You said powerful mage, and you're saying when I say powerful mage, I mean heavy damage numbers and burst. So you're trying to make something that that's what you're defining as a powerful mage. Here I would ask, I don't think this is bad, but I think why this approach is good to also call out. Egotistical, you're not even close to my level of power feeling, with long range and spells that stop enemies from getting close. Skillful play with timing checks. Reward players when performing difficult tasks, hit multiple enemies, gain control of lane and surprises. Actually, here, I'm going to cut this. Now I think I'm assuming some answers, and in the review I will ask you what I feel like I see your whys being, and you tell me if that's true. I think after we're done talking, you want to write that down. If it's written down, then that basically says instead of an ethereal version of it, it's real, you know. Self-made fantasy should be fulfilled by having a high learning curve. Okay. I think you're making this makes sense. I think we should talk about why this approach. I'm going to tell you what I see here, what I assume is your approach, and you tell me if my assumptions are correct or not, okay?
Yeah.
It seems like because you want these thematics of this seems to be your top goal, actually. Like in order, I almost think it's like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
Stack rank these. I think it's. I think not right now, but I think it also helps you because like here's why this is important. Let's say these two things come into conflict, right? We get to a place to where you're like, oh man, I've achieved this, but I haven't really achieved this as well. What should I do? You're like, well, it's more important to me that they're an egomaniac. So you know what? If they're popular, whatever. And because a lot of the time, almost never do all of these survive at equal levels intact, and you start kind of making trades. You kind of start making math decisions based on which one becomes the most important. This will help anchor you and any feedback givers in your design to help you meet your goals the most effectively and which goals to prioritize in terms of conflict. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think with this too, why this approach, I think I see egotistical, you're not close to my power level with long range spells that stop enemies from getting close. I don't associate I don't know why these two ideas for you, not because they're not, but I can't figure out what you're associating between this and this. Like where egotistical is connected to long range spells that stop enemies from getting close. What do you want to explain that really quickly?
I wanted to make a mage that was like very, very powerful. The idea, like, they knew they were powerful and they know it, and it's like you can't get close to me because it's hard. It's like the idea I had was that you can't even touch me. I'm so powerful you can't even touch me. You're not even near me. You can't. Not even close to my power level. I'm so far ahead from so far ahead from you that you can't even catch up to me. You can't kill me. You can't. Yeah, kiting gameplay.
This is what I read when you say that. Is that you think a kiting gameplay realizes the fantasy of somebody I literally can't touch. So you want a consistency between the gameplay and the emotions of the character here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. I think that makes sense. So I think that's the explanation to this relationship then that you're seeing. Okay, cool. That helps. Powerful mage, heavy numbers, and burst. Timing checks. What does this mean?
As you'll see in the spells, I really like, from HOTS, Kalthas.
Mm-hmm.
His Flame Strike is, in my opinion, is an excellent skill.
Okay.
If not paired with CC. I don't think paired with CC is a great example of timing check.
Uh-huh.
But if you can hit his Flame Strike without CC, it's so rewarding in a way.
I just swallowed a gnat. Excuse me 1 second. I'm going to get a glass of water really quickly. I will return shortly. Sorry, now that I have washed whatever I just swallowed down my throat. Okay. So it sounds like that you have a high power kiting mage. I think there's a lot of things in the design goals I would like to see fleshed out additionally. I think you've done a really good job of a couple of things here, and I want to call those things out. I think you have an idea of a player fantasy in your head with the thematics here. Actually, I would add that. I think at the top, actually, I'll put this above here for you. You want to, so how I always summarize it is sometimes I have the summary in my head when I start because it's really crisp in my mind. Sometimes I have the summary, I'm kind of finding the summary. Both are valid. What I do is if I have it in my head, I start with it and then build from it. If I need to explore and I feel like you wanted to explore a little bit first, which is super valid, I do that and then I go, what did I just say? What is all that stuff I just wrote, right? And then I summarize it. And then if I have a hard time summarizing it, what I also find is I usually then find some internal inconsistency. If I'm imagining a couple of versions of the same thing, or I'm imagining something, but then what I wrote down was different. Why? And that's a really good way to keep yourself honest with yourself. So one of the big things about design, and every designer from brand new to hobbyist, all the way up to like somebody that's been doing this for a decade, is getting your own head will screw with you a lot. And you're trying to basically get yourself to ask yourself a lot of different questions that finds all the weird, like, emotional and logical inconsistencies we have as human beings and sort them out on paper. So I think the summary step will also help here. I'd like to see if I was doing this, I'd be like, okay, what are you trying to achieve, kind of like in a one or two liner? I think you have it in here, and I'm piecing it together, but I think it's good to expose that for clarity. So I do think you're doing a really good job of imagining a player fantasy and kind of a gameplay, what that gameplay, I think what you've defined here is a player fantasy and then gameplay that you think matches that fantasy. And that's good. That's like, I feel like when you think about designers, like the August champs tend to have a lot of this. You know what I mean? Your Jinxes, your Vi's, your Jhin especially. Jhin is brilliant at this, right? That's a very important thing. These champions aren't popular for no reason, you know. They're really cool experiences. I think I'd like to see additional things thought about before even getting into the kit here.
Wait, before we even start with reading the kit. I didn't know what name to write, so I wrote Yogchamp for the sake of simplicity. You read Yogchamp, you know it's the name.
Oh, nice.
I had name to be determined, but it was awful. It looked really weird and awful to read, so I changed to Yogchamp because I didn't know what to write as a name.
I love that. That's so definitely just shared with us a pro tip. This is a good pro tip. Fake names that you would never use as the real name are the best fake names because you have to change it later and you won't get attached to it. What you don't want is, you know, I'm treating this as if this was real design, right? For Riot. If we come out and later narrative, you know, you've done the kit, you've done your testing, you've validated the gameplay, and narrative is ready to start actually writing pen to paper on deeper lore, or we're starting to go over to the name for the character that's really come to life. What you're not going to do is go like, oh, but I really liked Yogchamp. Why can't he just stay Yogchamp? And then like everybody's like, no, his name could never fucking be Yogchamp. Are you kidding me? And then when you come up with a new name, there's less anchoring to the fake name and less emotional kind of like weirdness you have to go around, because after you get used to any name, even if the name sucks, it's really hard to get rid of it unless it really sucks as a name. Like we had some problems with this on Valorant because the characters had final names at some point that were based on old art and old IP, and then when we changed the art and the IP, obviously we changed the names because it didn't fit anymore. Like Sage used to be a plant girl named Thorn. Like Thorn is really easy to say and really easy to get attached to. But it is not the character we made, you know? So it's like when we had to relearn it, some people, we even had that. I was like, why can't she just stay Thorn? It's like, the answer is she should have just been Heal Girl, right? Oh, hello.
This is something I actually learned from you.
Oh, really?
From what you said. You said.
Oh, on Twitter today?
Yeah, no, not this specifically, but you always complain about how you say hunter and.
Sorry, dog.
Yeah, but don't worry.
Oh, and Gumshoe instead of Cypher.
Yeah, exactly.
So Yogchamp is met with Dogchamp. Hi. Dogchamp's going to help be my assistant in design review. Down you go. All right. So yes, I think that's a really good approach here. In the design, I think here in the design goals, these design goals are still, I feel like the one issue I really see here is I think you've done a good job of meeting these thematic goals with your design goals, and thematic goals are consistent with each other. I think what I don't actually see here, and I'm going to add a new section for it. And I think we're going to write these out together instead of you going back and filling these out. I think separately, here's some questions I would want to see answered, especially, you don't have to answer this in all games, but I think if we're talking about competitive multiplayer, you do. Hold on, let me get my formatting like yours. There we go.
Formatting is okay. I wanted to get pretty so the stream could see it.
No, it's really like a weird thing I do. It's like I'm like, no, it must be right. Gameplay goals. What is this? There's a few questions I always like to answer, and this is a lot. It comes down to not balance, but game health and balanceability and structured gameplay. Like, I think you have the experiential gameplay down, but I think we really need to talk about the multiplayer components of this. What is this character excellent at.
Oh, I kind of did that sort of at the end after the kit.
Oh,
It
did you?
says pros and
Oh,
cons and why would you pick this jump over others and strengths and weaknesses.
I will rescind this until we look over it all. I would say you want to put that here, though.
Okay.
This, so think about those things, right? When we're talking about multiplayer too. What? Why will you not go? Here, going to edit.
It's okay.
It's fine. It's fine. So let's go there first. I think that's actually important because and this is something I brought up in Masala's review that I want to share. Information hierarchy in a document is very important. I'm not just nitpicking here. Is like initial kit. I'm going to start reading this skill. And let's say I'm like, wow, I don't know if this is going to have the kind of counterplay or gameplay interactions that are good, right? But I can't tell what lens to use under it because your goals above don't tell me how to evaluate if what you're trying to achieve. So what I need to be informed by, or anybody looking at it needs to be informed by, is what when I look at your skills are you trying to accomplish from terms of gameplay that I can go, that feels like that would be successful or would not be successful, or I could see some risks here that help us actually speak to the skill and how good of a job it does of meeting your goals. We'll only be able to talk about, does it feel like this? And I think one of the risks with only having that is that can be very subjective based on your audience. And what you don't want is 18 playtesters and 18 different opinions. About if you that's fine if you have that, but if it also anchors in the gameplay, somebody's like, yeah, it felt untouchable and I liked it. I don't know. It didn't feel superior as I'd like. I thought the burst damage was too high. Somebody reached me once and then killed me, and then I didn't feel very superior there. And you're like, you're kind of like left high and dry in a lot of ways, and you're kind of in a corner now. If you have these things to inform it, then you can actually help go, somebody reached me and blew me up. Actually, that's supposed to be, it isn't here, but it's like something that's supposed to be a weakness he has. So when I hear somebody complains about that or is frustrated with that, I write that down as a positive in my playtest, even though they had a negative emotion around it. You see what I mean?
Okay.
So
something else. Wait.
No, go ahead.
When you say information hierarchy, would it be better, for example, if, let's say, the W spell is more important than the Q? Should I have that first, or would it be better, or should I just leave it at passive Q, W, and R?
I think because League has such an established information hierarchy of how we read skills, this is fine. I think the information hierarchy comes down to goals, execution, and then risks, or goals, execution, and then addendums is fine. Is basically like, what are you trying to achieve? How are you going to achieve it? And then, what are any additional thoughts that might be color or not related to one of those other two things that you think is important to share? And I think right now, when I read this, I see your gameplay goals is actually the least important thing. And the thing that I'm going to have to go back up and go, okay, wait, why play this over mages? Okay, does that do this? And, I'm kind of flipping back and forth. It's, like I said, it seems really nitpicky, but goals should inform execution, not the other way around most of the time. So, or you could even say, like, let's say you had one spell you loved in this, and you're like, I want to build, you can do this. I have this kit, this spell, I think is really defining of a whole play pattern, and I want to build a kit around this spell. That could even be in your gameplay goals, is like, find a kit that revolves around a central mechanic X, and then that's a goal. And when I look at it, I'm like, wow, this skill seems way more important than the others. You're like, yeah, I wanted it to be. I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
Okay. Sure.
So intentionality goes a long way too. So, okay, I'm going to go down to your gameplay goals, okay? We're going to go down.
I just noticed there's a goal. It was left from the old kit. It says should be great at a great disadvantage against higher ranged mages.
So Zareth.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of is true, but shouldn't I then made it weaker against when you have an assassin over you?
Okay.
So it makes it so that you have a great disadvantage against ranged and high disadvantage when someone touches you. It's like it's conflicting. So maybe I shouldn't. I forgot to delete that, and I think I should have.
Go ahead. You can do that.
But
All right.
you have no editing during. That's why.
Uh-huh. No, that makes sense. All right, let's go into... I'm going to go in the base stats last because the base stats is a piece of execution to me.
Okay.
So here, I'm going to edit here. I'm going to just put the gameplay... I'm going to add that these are gameplay goals. Start here. Should be really strong against melee champions. High amount of CC and self-peel. Strong area control and team fights. Especially strong on sieges and objective control. High AoE burst, great late game. Okay. Weaknesses, shouldn't be good in early game skirmishes. Depends on level 6 ult to force fights. Skill shot reliant, way to secure damage. High cooldowns, cannot engage fights. Great. Why play this over other mages? This champ is a great source of magic damage that can be picked into assassins. Is that because assassins are melee?
Yeah.
Okay. Brings a bunch of CC in late game power into a comp. Should bring higher damage numbers than that of Swain or Vlad in exchange for less tankiness. Should spike earlier than Kassadin, be safer utility. So, okay, cool. Strength at different levels of play. I expect the kit to be strong in mid elo and then grow weaker low elo players. So this is one I'm just going to throw out because this is a place where this makes sense. Oh, we got to start this over. Time for boss battle music. I think League has a really different philosophy on this. This is going to sound really catty. I'm sorry. I disagree with League's philosophy on where champions are allowed to be for certain elos, and I know that's something they push, and you're following that framework. So you're doing a good job by doing this. Because you're meeting the goals of the product. I will have a hard time evaluating this fairly, so I'm going to call it as a auto pass. Because I think all champions should scale effectively with skilled play, and no champion should be should be good in lower levels of play as opposed to higher levels of play. This is something in Valorant that I find very important. Hi. Oh, hi.
2019 would have been a very rough year for you then.
20 what?
2019, I think, with Irelia and Kali and Atrox.
I guess.
You don't want to know.
I just know that they're more okay with having champs that are 4 elos, from what I've heard, than I am. So good job. You met the goals that have been stated by the game, and you should do that as a designer. I am not objective enough to evaluate this right now. So, whoops. All right, great. Gameplay goals I'm not seeing here. So I'm piecing a few things together. I think, again, summarize. Oops. Summarize goals below into single statement. Like, what are you trying to achieve with this again, right? I think this is closer, but I think you're also here relies on current comparisons only. Should also add own identity to why pick. This meaning here that like these things can all be true, and I think are good anchoring points. These should be examples. Like, like for example, between summarizing our goals, talking about its own identity to the gameplay, and then kind of piling that all together, you could be like, let's say, why play this over other mages? I can rely on my own. I'm going to throw this together, based on what I'm picking up from you here, is a character that's very good at kiting and keeping melee characters at bay, as long as they can show a really high percentage hit rate on their skill shots and remain undisrupted. Players who believe in their own ability to reliably stay in the right position, hit skill shots, and work with their team to be in the ideal position have a way higher level of output than players who get disrupted or players who have a lower hit rate on their chances. High risk, high reward, but not a level of reliability that nobody could ever deal anything about it. Sounds like what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Okay, we want to write that down because when I see it from that standpoint, that makes sense to me. When I try to put but I'm extracting all of this through me doing a lot of connective tissue thinking on like what I'm seeing as patterns through what you've written down. By writing that down explicitly, then you get to tell me what to expect instead of me trying to interpret it. Somebody else could totally, for example, what do you mean high amount of CC and self-peel? That's bullshit. He's supposed to be strong against a melee, so who does anything about him if he's longer range? You get into these very detailed arguments very quickly about very specific things when we need to be talking about that. And you're like, and so if I said, I think this guy being good against these melee champions is crazy, you're like, well, he's a kiter. He has to be. I'm like, okay, it doesn't seem like he has enough weaknesses because he has long range. Like, okay, what we're doing now is going, hey, can we resolve these conflicts into a way that actually helps you meet your goals as opposed to just, kind of swats your ideas around, you know what I mean, and kind of beats them up. And I think by clearly articulating these summaries, you give yourself a lot more ability to communicate clearly with anybody who would like to look at it, generating feedback. Or if your design lead or somebody is reviewing it, they know what your intent is and can better help you reach that intent.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
So much when writing, for example, strengths and weaknesses, you much rather see like a whole paragraph instead of bullet points.
I'd like to see both. I'd like to see these things. Okay. I'd like this to be. So I still think you haven't written down gameplay goals crisply. I think you've written down many elements of gameplay goals that are supporting evidence or are features that you would need to achieve goals. But I don't know. But that summary I busted out there is something I want to see in your design document so that I can know what you're trying to achieve and we can evaluate if these strength and weakness sets would achieve this. And we can talk about it. I'm like, ooh, how does this fit your goal? And you're like, oh, I have this idea. And then we would add it to the goals. Or we'd go, hey, maybe it doesn't. You're like, you know what? Maybe that isn't important. And now we're crispening the design on paper before you even have to get it in game. And you're saving yourself, in a real environment, weeks, potentially months of iteration.
Okay. I see.
And so I think that's an important thing. So I'm going to try to fill this in really quickly, okay, based on what we said. Create a high mechanical skill, because I think there's multiple kinds of skill, but it looks like you want to focus on this mage that kites and plays maximum keep away from threats with great positioning when combined with great positioning. Because you have to have both, right? It sounds like then we have some supporting evidence here. I think this is where we can put some of this stuff in here. Probably like what are some outcomes? Like let's think about outcomes we want. I'm going to fill some stuff in and you tell me if this makes sense, okay?
Okay.
When played, let's say perfectly, untouchable by melee champions.
Yeah.
Right? Has when played perfectly. Actually, I think it's actually this because that's your thesis. You're counting on this on a lot of these, which is cool. I think that actually helps us, right? Untouchable by melee champions. I think you would want something like has massive damage potential. Big scaling. And then excellent CC utility. So here's the thing. Let's put in sieging. So when I see this, if I see this and I see a few of these things, I go, not because it's a bad idea abstractly. How does it either there's some goals we haven't articulated, or this doesn't necessarily fit that goal unless I'm misunderstanding Sieger here.
So let's say, for example, an Aram forms in mid lane.
Mm-hmm.
Since the kit has the passive is that you have to stand still for a few seconds. The numbers are quite difficult to make, but the whole point is that if you're let still for a few seconds, if the enemy team doesn't punish you from standing still, it'll be very hard to kill you.
Okay. Then
to play around the champion, because high damage and CC comes online.
It sounds like we have another goal.
Okay.
It sounds like we have high commitment to unlock potential. Has to stand still to unlock best output. Right? This is and what we're talking about now. Actually, I think these things are features. But when we look at this now, instead of having a list of stuff, what we have is I want a high mechanical skill mage that kites and plays maximum keep away from threats when combined with great positioning. When played perfectly, my outcomes, and this means when I look at the abilities, will these abilities generate outcomes? Untouchable by melee champions. That's something we can put it out. Let's say we put this in game and we do some tests. We can go, let's test if this is untouchable by melee champions. And we could actually craft a test for that and validate, is that true or not? And then before we get there, here at this stage, we can say, is this a desirable outcome we'd even want? But here, I think it's fine to say that. Has massive damage potential. High commitment to unlock potential. Has to stand still to unlock best output. Wow, this is huge commitment. Punished when sorry, let's try it this way actually. Big punishments for even minor mistakes. It seems like. And that's missed skill shots, bad timing, bad position, right? So these things start boiling up into this now. I can see why you would have high cooldowns, because it meets this goal. I can see why you would have this, because it meets this goal, right? And you've always had these goals in your head, I think, right? I don't think you're like just learning this, but I think what we're doing is we're actually saying this is the true target. And these things are all things you've thought of that would help you meet this kind of target that's been in your mind about it.
Okay.
Does that make sense, or am I missing something?
No, yes, I got it.
Okay. No, it's but you're not. Do you think that's wrong?
No.
Oh, okay.
Like, this is the gameplay goals would be like would be kind of like the thematics to fulfill and the side goals, but of the gameplay.
That's right. And I think this I'm gonna take a quick aside. On a lot of games, this stuff is important to do. I think at any game, it is much more front and center and important in a competitive game or a multiplayer game, because this is also how you protect the roster and the balance of the game against your champion, which I know sounds weird. But in a multiplayer game, what we don't want is the kind of zero fun or the zero-sum fun. Is there's n units of fun, and for me to have fun, I have to take fun, right? I don't like to use fun generally, but I think what we're doing here is we're giving opportunities, and this is something I'm actually going to talk about on one of my design things. We're giving you a control panel. If things are ever imbalanced or things are ever bullshit, you actually know immediately what to start working on to fix it. where you want that guy's weaknesses to actually be and why, and not just that you want this, right? Let's say I can buy too much CDR and I can overcome this. That's a real thing, right? What we want is these outcomes. And so let's say we fuck up. Let's say, oh my God, he's like just runs away with the game and nobody can ever catch him, even range champions. Oops, didn't want that. That wasn't part of our goals, right? What we do is go, well, what should this character be bad at? What's the outcomes we want to see? Well, are they being punished for their minor mistakes? Do they have to stand still, unlock their best output? Do they have a high commitment? And we can ask questions and see if we're seeing that. And if it's like, oh yeah, we think those are true. Okay, what about this goal? Is it take high mechanical skill? Is it too easy to get to these outcomes and happening too frequently? We can start asking real questions about our character and seeing what we should do to solve this character in a way that doesn't have to murder his identity. You know what I mean? You get to keep the champion intact. And I think that's what this is so important about in multiplayer specifically. I think even like Horizon Zero Dawn and those guys like to do this. I just think they're going to be much, much, much more focused on these ideas, the emotions, you know?
So, a few things I wanted to say that when making when trying to see if the champion felt weak or like when making the weaknesses, I thought of I played mid lane for a while and thought, how good would my champion be in this situation? Would it work? Could it do something? Would you get flamed for playing this champion at this very moment? And the answer, sometimes, especially for example when the jungler, a level 2 fight between the junglers, you usually have no priority in lane, so your jungler can't be helped, and you can't run towards people. You rely on your jungler to run to you, because your spells are very, very weak when you're moving, when you're chasing. And the long range skill tree is very, very slow, so it's A, easy to dodge, and B, really hard to chase someone. So skirmishes and fights that don't happen around you, or that where you don't have the initiative, you're probably going to be very useless, especially in the early game. That is pre-level 6. Level 6, it should be better, but it still has some issues.
And I think that's other things you want to boil up, because you're coming at it from, and this makes sense. A lot of people do this, especially newer to design. You're imagining situations in your head and why that character would be weak, which is a great way to get started. So there's a design. One of the important things in design to start practicing is abstraction, is taking those situations and boiling them up to a higher level of zoom, to just pulling that camera back and going, when I say these things, that jungler, I can't go help my jungler. I think that's right. That's 100% correct. Usually those instincts are very correct, right? What does that mean for this champion? He's bad at chasing. Okay, do I want him to be bad at chasing? Is he position and location dependent? Is this a feature and a goal set of an outcome I want? And I think it is in this case, but I think always taking that extra step to take the specifics and boil them up into more generalities is a really helpful step. It's a very, very important part, because otherwise you end up with a Jenga tower that like one thing goes wrong and the whole thing comes crashing down because it was too detailed. It's like the meta changes and junglers don't exist. Like, I know that wouldn't happen, but you know. And it's like, or even take a Valorant example, is like in Valorant, people are like, oh, Brim's the best dude because he's the best executor, right? And then suddenly everybody's playing really slow. Like, people are doing really drawn out executes and they're doing a lot of slimy play. With like more soft executes and bigger fakes. It's like, we don't want something to have to be reliant on that state being true. And I think that's that level where abstraction helps, is it helps you understand the connective tissue between those ideas. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I agree.
So I'm going to leave this here for you to fill out, okay? I want to see at least 2 more goals when you're done. Now let's go into your kit. Now I think I understand what you're trying to achieve. Let's see what you got.
Okay.
All right. This is making sense so far? Everybody, I hope this is interesting for everybody because I'm having a really good time, honestly.
With the extra typing, my formatting went. They died.
I'm sorry.
Well, it was all pretty and organized. No, it's spaced all weird.
It's fine. It's way more important to have all the information in the right spots than it is that it's pretty. Pretty's for artists. All right, passive. So the initial kit, we're going to evaluate it based on those goals we just talked about. When Yogg Champ stands still for a few seconds, they gain bonus range on their basic attacks and their spells. I also like your gender-neutral language. It means you haven't decided on the theme. Very good. Good kit design to not over-assume theme. Gain bonus range on their basic attack and spells, and gain base range on their basic attacks, and their spells gain additional effects. The bonus effects trigger when they stand still for 3 seconds, and then an additional time when standing still for 6 seconds. What's this mean? Can you clarify this?
There's like two phases.
Oh, okay. It's a two-stage.
Right. Ascended 1 and then Ascended 2. Yeah.
And so
Ascended for ease of for readability.
Okay. Oh, I see. Oh, you even took screenshots to do this and then drew over them. That's very cool. We do not do this that often, but I think it's a good method. I actually think it's really smart. That's great.
There's small notes on the right, just in case. Especially for comments that I wanted to add, but I wasn't sure if it meant it would rather be on the doc. It's something that I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the passive in later stages of the game, 6 seconds seems like a lot. So I wanted to maybe tune it down to maybe like have it 3, 2.5, and 2, and 6, 5, and 4 seconds.
That makes sense.
But I wasn't sure if it's too strong or not. I'd have to feel it, I think, which I can't. I tried a little bit in game, but I mean, it's hard.
Yeah, that is so. At the initial paper kit phase, does not matter. So I'm gonna first tip. It's gonna save you a lot of anxiety. You ready?
Numbers don't matter.
And you can do this. Like, these numbers will change billions of times, basically. Not billions, but, I'm exaggerating. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. What I get, though, is you have, hey, when standing still, Yogg Champ gains basically, if he stands still for a short amount of time, he gains 1 stack, and he stands still for a longer amount of time, he gains an additional stack. I think this is fine. League's an established enough game. I think always do this. Pretend your numbers that you do fill in are suggestions. You're like, I'm thinking he's kind of short range, basically, and then gets long. This is what you're saying, right? He's kind of like mid range, and then he gets really long range. So that's fine. And then you lose these effects as soon as they move. I love your diagram. This is great. The more sketching and like mad science sketches you do with stuff, I think the better. I do not do this, and honestly, I think it's something I should do more of. So this is great. Cool. That makes sense. I see how that meets your goals. Large commitment. But let's go over the whole kit first. But I see how this, now that I understand your goals, instead of like, well, does he have to have 2 stages, and talking about a lot of these details that I don't think are that important at this stage to really get in the weeds of, like, hey, I understand how this skill is serving your thesis, and therefore, oh, that's cool. I could see this skill really fitting on this character. Okay, Q. Yogg Champ throws a slow wave of magic that slows enemies for X% for Y seconds. I'll let you clean the rest of those up.
Yeah, it has a lot of numbers. I try to compare numbers with real numbers from League. Like, for example, here it says close to W damage, but less than its center. But the point of this skill is to be their primary form of CC. You to use this spell as a way to secure your W, that it will be your main source of damage.
Okay. So,
And
you just hit on the, you just beat me to the thing. So, here's the bonus. What you just told me should be the most important information that is about this skill.
okay,
Because now what you're doing, and you'll notice there's a pattern that I'm doing here. And is that what you're trying to achieve, how you're trying to achieve it. What you're trying to achieve, how you're trying to achieve it. Always like that, because then we can always evaluate. Let's say we go, the wave sucks. I don't think a cone will work. The center damage seems overly there. Can we make it more precise? It seems too forgiving. Oh my god, we're in the weeds. Is your skill going to survive? Is this character going to do it? Oh no. But instead you go, this is supposed to be the CC thing. This should be what the character uses to keep people at bay in a primary form of crowd control. Great. How do you plan to do that? Like this. Wonderful.
okay,
So I think going back and doing that in each case, what you're like, you can do it verbally for now, but you would want to insert these play patterns into each skill.
I see. Yeah, that's a good point that I hadn't thought about it.
No, it's totally fine. Honestly, 80% of when people haven't done design before is information ordering and being explicit about stuff that feels obvious to you. Because it is obvious to you. It's in your head. Like, you know all of this. You don't need to tell yourself, right? But if we're doing design is half communication and half actually making things. And the communication part is, since we're doing the paper parts, we have to leverage a lot of the communication. Because now we can make sure we're set up for success. All right. And okay, I like your diagrams though. Like, keep doing these. These are great. These are wonderful. Like, I like the words over it, everything. These are brilliant.
Okay.
Um,
I wanted wait. One thing.
please.
This is slow because I wanted the skill shot to be very, very slow.
Okay, that's awesome. That's I think that's very important. After a 1 second, or then after a short, and then, or after a medium and then a long delay, deal heavy damage in the circle. How is this different? So first of all, is this just slower, higher damage brand W?
Kinda, yeah.
I mean, that's fine. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, yeah. I hadn't thought about brand W, but yes. Though it varies in range. I think. Let me check. Radius.
Oh, the radius goes up, and the radius goes up here as you're ascended more.
Yeah. I think brand is what, 300? 260. Okay.
Okay.
It's smaller than brand double.
All right, great. Let me look at the mechanic now, actually. I didn't even look at your mechanic yet. Slow moving thing that does heavy CC with a big slow. Ascended 1 increases the slow from a small to a medium amount, and then Ascended 2 increases it to basically a root and a stun. Oh, I see. Yeah, okay.
What I wasn't sure about is if having a 60% slow was enough of a reward for Ascended 1. I thought maybe adding the 90% decay in slow in Ascended 1, but I didn't want it to be very punishing in lane.
Mm-hmm.
Because standing still for 3 seconds while farming isn't as hard. Especially against a melee champ, you don't want the champion to be standing in between their melees and their ranged minions that just chuck double.
Right, but you're supposed to have long cooldowns, so I think it seems like it's also okay. If this, I feel like, yeah, I think you're like, you want, oops. I feel like I'm so out of date on League, but I feel like you're standing still here and you get that first passive. If it's easy to do, this skill is easy to dodge, right? Mm-hmm. So it just allows you to, it just allows, I actually think that's one of the things with this. Is it feels like, I'm going to put this comment on here. But here. I see why you're trying to do this. One comment I would have is, seems like it's not about my skill, but enemy dumbness. And what I mean by that is, while instead of scaling with my skill, this mechanic might not meet your goal of making a high skill champ. Instead, be a noob killer instead of a high skill play. This is a really hard balance to strike in mechanics in League of Legends broadly. How do you make something that feels hard to dodge but hard to hit, so that basically it can scale well with skill? Something that moves slowly and is easy to dodge will basically, even if I'm the best with it and I can predict, you're going to end up with a Kalefish situation, a high-end play only, where I can only use these skills on CC'd targets, or otherwise good players will invalidate my kit, good enemies. So you'll want to watch for that here. If the reliability is too low or too much in the enemy's hands, you'll run into a problem where you have so much counterplay that your guy doesn't do anything. So that's something to think about. Just a mechanical note there.
Okay.
And this,
yes.
sorry?
No. That I wanted to say that I hadn't thought about that, about the difference between the player being good and the enemy being dumb.
Yeah, and it feels the same, but it's very different when you actually interact with those things too. Okay, great. I really like Kalefish's Flame Strike. I love feeling this. Like, this is totally fine to put in there. Again, we want to put the play pattern here. Is you're like, you want people to lead. I'm guessing you want people to lead targets, or to actually have this comboed with a CC in order to hit. Ascended 1, increase the radius by a lot. It can hit the full minion wave. Deals 20% true damage when hitting more than one champion. So I'm going to talk to you about your Ascended 2 bonuses on the passive when we're done. I'm noticing a pattern here that I want to discuss. But overall, other than that, this seems fine. Seems like really good bread and butter damage skill, fun to use. I think the big wind up, big damage skills can be really cool. I think the make sure it isn't bad player destroyer is still the feedback here.
So
Instead of good player killer.
Kuryuvi asked, how big is 20% bonus true damage? It's a lot.
Oh yeah, I understand that. I don't think this is weak. That's not my problem with it.
Kuryuvi asked in chat.
Oh,
It's a lot of
Karubi.
damage.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
This base damage is solo Karthus Q, which is Karthus' main damage ability, and big scaling. Adding 20% bonus true damage to 2 or more people is a lot.
Yeah, it's a team. You could do a team wipe.
Yeah, and more than that, the reason it blows up twice is A, to punish people who misstep, and B, zone control. You can throw, let's say you missed your Q, you can then throw your W near you so that they can't get close. It's a way to, let's say, not add reliability, but it's also like a safety spell.
Right. I think this is basically a pretty good spell, and I think a bonus damage, a big bonus, big damage for the big cost of your passive makes sense. I think I want to more talk about. I don't think any of the ascended effects are poor. I think how they fit together is something worth talking about. But I think as individual skills, these work. Okay, let's go to the E. I don't have a lot more to say on the W. I think it's pretty good. Makes sense to me. I think it's simple, and I think that's good in this case. Yogg-Champ pushes back the enemies in a small cone, and dealing low or no damage, and slowing them briefly. Ascended 1 deals bonus damage and the slow lasts longer. Destroys projectiles in the area instantaneous. Oh, okay. This is your a melee got to me. I get one chance to get him off of me, and I better not get out of position as long as this is on cooldown.
Yeah.
Okay.
This spell is going to have a big cooldown. I wasn't sure 12 seconds because CDR might be turn it down to like 8 seconds, and I don't want that. But the whole destroy projectiles in the area. It's it's not only to let's say a Caitlyn ult or something that is going to burst you, but it's also something like Blitzcrank Hook that will basically kill this champion by itself, because A, you're mispositioned, and B, you can stand still for a second, so you're not really doing much. So having some kind of safety spell that isn't just like anchoring yourself, that was also something I tried. Uh, I wanted a defensive spell that could be also used aggressively, but not in like heavy damage way, but in a way that nullifies the enemy.
Okay, that makes sense. I think this is a fine self-peel spell. It meets your goal. I think talking about this is important here, is that it's kind of like you're basically, when this, I think there's a play, see in the play pattern descriptors that we were talking about earlier, right? What you want to talk about is this gives me an opportunity to disengage and neutralize threats, but has a long cooldown, and when this is down, I'm vulnerable. That's what you're trying to achieve with this skill, from what I see.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, the more you've committed, the better it is at doing that job. Seems good. That makes sense. I think talking about the play pattern again is my feedback here, but I think the mechanic checks out. I think this is weird. Mostly because I'm like, is this matter? I think this does. This seems superfluous. Unless you're using it to farm.
No, this was more of a... I wanted to add bonus damage just in case it, like... Because the whole point of the champion is to burst.
Mm-hmm.
And adding a little bit more of damage, like if you, let's say a Talon jumps on you, let's say, oh no you don't, and push him back, and having that extra bonus damage adds to a whole maybe 100 to 0 that you wouldn't quite get on a maximum range fight. I wanted it to matter when you use the E over not using the E in combat.
Okay, that's fair. Then that is not superfluous. Good reasoning. Okay. Let's move on to the ult. Yogg Champ instantly ascends to level 2 and hits nearby enemies for damage. Enemies that enter the area after cast are hit for 66% of the original damage. So it leaves a persistent effect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gains movement speed while ascended. This lasts big cooldown. Okay. What do you again, tell me what you want this to do. This is your power chord ultimate. What's your play pattern goals here?
I wanted, so without the ult, I felt like the champion wouldn't quite work in team fights, especially with, let's say, the big mobility in huge champions, or maybe, I don't know, Ally Dacier just ulted them back, and now you suddenly are unable to participate in the team fight. You have to reposition and wait 6 seconds again. So instead, what I wanted them to do is to press R and right-click on the enemy, and then be able to do that. But I didn't want them to just right-click and R and right-click and not lose the damage, and that's why I added the little punishment of if you cast R and then walk towards them, you deal a little bit less damage. That will also matter.
Okay.
The movement speed buff, it's supposed to be small, because it's not like that's more of a feel buff rather than a buff that matters.
Right.
Because the point of the skill is not to, let's say, A, run away, or B, chase people down. It's more so like, oh no, I was standing still for half a second and they ran out of my range.
Okay.
Kind of like, if I think Brom has 10% movement speed on his E.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically that.
Okay. I think that makes sense to me. And by, again, describing that play pattern, what behaviors, and this is why I think it's important, because you just described to me several key components that I think are important to this skill. One, you described what behaviors you do and do not want to see, how this works with the rest of the kit and the play pattern of the character, and when I should and should not use it, and how I feel like it should be rewarded or punished, which is good. That's really good stuff to lay out. I think when doing that, when I hear this, I think this, while you say it's somewhat cosmetic, I think that's true. The use case you're trying to support here is that you want to be able to reposition and be ascended, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's probably some better, I think with this has potential to allow for chasing and runaway cases that I think might be anti-behaviors you said you don't want. It might be better to try to come up with an alternate version of this mechanic that would better meet those goals of it's not good for running away or chasing, but it's very good for repositioning. Could you sharpen this skill to additionally meet those goals more explicitly? Like, it can't be used to run away. Could you make it so I almost couldn't use this at all to run away or chase, or very, very badly, and use it much better to reposition?
Would making the, for example, making the movement speed towards enemies, would that would help?
That would,
I don't think
that would make it chase, but even like modifying the mechanics. So, for example, let's say you take this range here. I'm just gonna spitball, but like instead of entering a state and then moving while ascended, because it allows you to reposition kind of constantly, which then is just basic movement rules. Which is, if I move and I move faster, by that virtue, I'll be able to chase or run away, right? What you want is a committed team fight, right? And that team fight's already kind of like there, and now you're like, aha, it's time, and I'm going to do this, and now I'm in the team fight, but at the right range.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like something like cast this and choose a nearby location, teleport to that location ascended. Maybe with like a 2 ammo and a small cooldown or something, will make sure that I'm still stationary, and all the cues about this character is stationary and I can catch them are true, and everything else works. But I can't use it to passively chase or run away. I could use it to position. Maybe I could use it to run away over a wall and then shoot them. That's kind of cool. But then you could do something to where I can reposition twice in a fight. Am I going to choose the right positions and times and spaces to reposition within that fight, which is another vector of skill as well, is the resource management of that. So I think by making it a sharper version of those goals, by making it more explicit and more into guiding the behaviors you want to see and less into guiding the behaviors you don't want to see, you can make the skill more successful at meeting those goals.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
I agree. Yeah. In fact, you just made me think of. I want to play on the teleport.
Uh-huh.
Wouldn't want him to teleport, but I'd make the spell something like, for 2 seconds you can move, and then you have to stand still. So, and maybe add like a 5 second, not 5, way too low. Something like 10-second cooldown
Uh-huh.
instead of a teleport, because I wouldn't want them to blink and dodge skill shots easily.
Right. You
I
could.
want to have to tank skill shots.
That's right.
If you want to be ascended.
That's right. And you could make that, some of the mechanics you could put there is like a fade in and out, so the teleport takes a second to activate and kind of like phase in and out, so that you're still vulnerable if you do it too late, or you can't use it reactively and you have to use it proactively, which would then also reward good game sense. Like kind of like what Omen's teleport's like in League of Legends, or in League of Legends in Valorant.
In Valorant, exactly.
Yes. Something like that I think could benefit this ult very a lot.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, cool. I think we did it. So
We're done.
overall, well, thank you for presenting this. I think my high-level takeaways are: make sure to explicitly lay out your gameplay goals, summarize the objective of each part of your kit and each part of your character, so that we know what you're trying to achieve. So that if we're having a discussion, I can understand, do I disagree with what you're trying to achieve and we need to talk about the goals? Or do I see problems in the execution that will not help you meet those goals as well, or have challenges? Then we can talk on the same play. And then your character is also resistant to details changes ruining the character's identity, you know? And so that'll make your design a lot easier to be successful. I think just communicating more of the high-level boil-ups and abstracting out one level above. I think you did a good job with your skills with that explanation. I think your kit actually, now that we suss the goals out, like now that I've teased those goals out with you onto the page, I see how your kit works to meet these goals. I understand what you're trying to achieve, and that I don't think you're super far off with this kit. I think you have to watch some of the enemies being too good for this character as opposed to this character being too good. And so I think you would want to work on some reliability and make sure that it has some kind of reliable, and this is why Kael'thas, I think, is designed the way he is that there's a reliable combo a player can pull off against good players. if you want to access or up the how hard that is mechanically or the skill requirements, that could be a good place to go. But it's still going to have a certain level of reliability to be pickable.
Mhm. And now that we've seen the keys, I wanted to answer because some people during the thematic and gameplay goals, some people started comparing it to Seraph and Ezreal. More
Yeah.
Seraph, and Seraph is made more to poke, long
Mm-hmm.
range, consistent damage, and I think this champ is more of a commitment and zone control champion, so it
Mm-hmm.
would be if anything similar to Orianna or Seer, which is something I like.
Mm-hmm.
But Orianna has like a way more bursty and kitey kit that relies on her not only moving around the fight and dancing, kind of like thematically, like moving the ball around and her moving closer, while Azir relies more on the attack speed and summoning soldiers and
Mm-hmm.
dancing around the fight and then Shurima shuffling people.
Mm-hmm.
While this champ wants to stand still and deal damage and zone the enemies out of the fight, or not letting them escape. Which is why I think it's like the identity of this champion.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think that identity does stand on its own. I do think it feels like a mage Ezreal, a CC mage Ezreal. I don't think that's bad in a game with 140 plus champions. Like that's fine. Like we're at the no unique ideas unless you're basically making like what's her butt? Who's the book cat? Yumi, thank you. Like that, like until you go that crazy, you're basically going to be near other champion space. That's not a bad thing. I think a champion like this would be cool. So I think also just like subjectively, I like it. But I think yeah, so good stuff. Definitely. See, you were nervous for nothing. You just had to learn how to organize your information and to boil up and abstract. This is something that associate designers have a hard time with. Like designers often start very detail oriented, very in the 1 foot view. That's expected in junior design. That's expected in hobbyist design to me. So teaching abstraction, boil up, goal orientation is a key design skill that people learn with experience and training. So I think you did a great job. I think what you had in your head was right, and I think we just had to help expose some of that. And I think it's a cool pitch, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.